Hello, good morning, and welcome to the How to Do Business with the California State Government webinar. My name is Jolene Graham, and I am joined here with my coworker, Matt Zweier. We are both business outreach liaisons with the California Department of General Services, and we specifically work in the Office of Small Business and Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise Services, or OSDS as we like to refer to it. Matt is going to guide you through this webinar today. And after each section, we're going to take a short break for a question and answer portion. With that being said, please use the chat feature to send in any questions that you may have. I'm going to be monitoring them as they come in. Disclaimer here, there's a lot of people who have joined this webinar, which is super awesome. I'm going to go ahead and monitor your questions as best as I can. At the end of this webinar, if you feel like your question hasn't been answered, please email custserve@dgs.ca.gov. That's custserv@dgs.ca.gov. We have one of our staff members constantly monitoring that email inbox, so we'll be able to answer your questions there too as well. Also, Matt and I would like to extend a large thank you to Caltrans and CPM Logistics for making this webinar happen. Without them, we would not be here today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking now, and Matt, please take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Jolene, for getting us started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Matt Zweier. I'm excited today to take you through the beginning steps of how your business can pursue contract opportunities with the state of California. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about a number of topics today. We're basically going to cover an overview and an introduction of kind of the programs, the main certifications you're going to get, eProcure, the main online procurement system for the state of California, as well as some helpful resources and tips. One of the topics you don't see us covering today is the COVID-19 pandemic and how it is affecting state procurement and contract opportunities for businesses. It's not something we really plan to talk about, and I'll just very briefly say that, if you or your company is interested in helping out with the pandemic, you think you can provide goods or services that the state needs at this point in time, that's great, that's wonderful. There's actually a very specific place we're going to send you for that. Jolene is going to post that in the comments or in the chat feature so you can all see it. So we're not going to talk about emergency purchasing or what it's like to sell to the state during a pandemic, but if you're interested, just go to that place. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is some goals that the state of California has. So the state of California has a goal to spend 25% of all contract dollars with small businesses and 3% of all contract dollars with disabled veteran business enterprises. And I know 3% and 25% may not seem like a whole lot of money, but when you look at how much money the state actually spends, it's quite a bit. So last year alone, the state spent $10.5 billion just doing contract work. That's separate than the state budget and employees and things like that. About 2.2 billion of it went to small businesses and 336 million went to DVBEs. That's a lot of money. There is a lot of opportunity there for your company to get involved and to be part of it. One of the main ways that you can be part of it is through state certifications, and that's really what we're going to talk today about. There are 3 certifications that the state of California has. Small business for the purpose of public works, which is like an offshoot of the main small business one, and then disabled veteran business enterprise. And we're going to talk in detail about all 3 of those, what the qualifications are, what the benefits are, and how it'll affect you. But I do want to mention some other certifications that you're probably aware of or maybe you heard of that aren't exactly state certifications. One is the Caltrans Disadvantaged Business Enterprise certification. Many of your companies may qualify this if you are a disadvantaged business enterprise. That certification, it is through Caltrans. It's technically a federal certification. It does apply to certain Caltrans contracts. but it doesn't apply to the rest of the state of California. And I say this because I frequently meet business owners who tell me, oh, I have a disadvantaged business enterprise certification for the state of California. That means I'm a preferred bidder when the Department of General Services is going to bid out a contract, right? I get special preference. And unfortunately, I have to tell them that no, that's not the case. Caltrans has this certification because it's technically a federal certification from the federal government, and Caltrans gets money from the federal government. And then there are just other certifications out there. There's Women Business Enterprise, there's Minority Business Enterprise, there's also veteran certifications, there's service disabled veteran certifications. The city and county of San Francisco even has an LGBTQ certification for businesses. So what I'm really trying to illuminate is that, one, it's important for you to know kind of what certifications you have, who gave them to you, what city, county, state, government entity gave them to you, and when do they actually apply? You know, when you're going after a contract opportunity, what actually applies here? So what, you know, Jolene and I are presenting is state of California. And so that's really the three at the top: small business for public works, and disabled veteran. Before we dive into what the qualifications are, do we have any questions about kind of this concept of certifications, which ones are with the state, and which ones are perhaps elsewhere, as well as any questions about the goals? It's our first Q&A. We're going to have a lot of these throughout the webinar.
Okay, Matt, we do have a question here. Someone would like to know who does WBE and MBE.
Ooh, that's a great question. So who does Women Business Enterprise and Minority Business Enterprise? I believe the federal government has a Women Business Enterprise certification. I'm actually not quite sure who has a Minority Business Enterprise. Those might be getting phased out for the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise certification. There are also some private entities that offer those types of certifications. I can't really speak to those in detail because I'm only with the state, and I'm not with other programs. And I can't really speak for those other programs. But I would say if you can get those certifications, whoever's offering them, and do it. You know, if you want to do work with the feds and the feds have that kind of a certification, absolutely go ahead and pursue it. Or if you want to work with your city or county, and they have those kinds of certifications, then absolutely go get them.
And Matt, can I add one thing to that just really quick?
Sure. This is, by the way, this is Abigail Brown from CPM Logistics, one of the event organizers and hosts.
Sorry, I'll make it really brief. I'm here to listen mainly, but the WBE, there's EDWOSB, which is through SBA and 8A. It's their 8A program. That's the federal certification. And then there's also a private WBE certification through Astra Women's Business Alliance. And then the MBE certifications, everything we've seen, those tend to be more local. Like in the Bay Area, it's BART has that certification. And so if anybody has, whoever asked that question, you can email us and we can help connect you with some of that stuff.
Great. Thank you, Abigail.
Sure.
Jolene, any other questions before we move on?
Yes, we do have another question here. With the state of California, are you allowed to hold more than one certification? So can you be an SB and a DVBE as well as an SBPW?
Yes, you can. You can hold all three certifications if you want. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between the SB and the SBPW in just a moment. So I'll tell you why you don't actually want to get both of those. But let's go ahead and dive into the certification eligibility requirements, because I sincerely hope everybody here is at least eligible for one or more of these certifications. So small business eligibility. When we're talking about a small business, we're talking about a company that is independently owned and operated. It is not part of a large corporation. It's not a subsidiary of a large corporation. In most cases, it's not a franchise of a large corporation. And this is kind of the first big criterion. Additionally, you can't be dominant in your field of operation. I know it might seem strange that a small company could be the dominant business in a field of operation, and this almost never happens, but it is one of the criteria. And that's really because this certification is designed to help you, you, the small business, against the competition. But if you are, the leading person, then you are the competition. Other businesses need help with you. And when we're talking about small businesses, we're really talking about California small businesses. So another requirement is that the headquarters of the business need to be in California, and the owners or officers, in the case of a corporation, need to have their primary residence in California. Again, we're just getting at, we really want to, help out California companies and people who live in California. If you have multiple owners, they all need to live in California. If you have multiple offices, the headquarters needs to be in California. The other offices can be anywhere. Employees can live anywhere. These days we're all working from our home, and certainly businesses have employees all over the country or even the planet. That's perfectly fine. Additionally, your company needs to have a gross annual receipts of less than $15 million, and that's with affiliates, and that's averaged over the last 3 tax years. So if within the last 3 years, one year you made slightly above 15 million, but the other 2 you made less, your average is probably going to be less. And we say together with affiliates because if you have affiliate companies that you own, that is also considered part of this gross annual receipts. What we have seen some people do in the past is take a company and break it up into a bunch of smaller companies that all individually have less than $15 million, but together as affiliates, they are actually not a small company, they're actually a large company. All right, lastly, you have to have less than 100 employees. That doesn't count owners. Owners are not employees, so just than 100 employees. Now, if you are a manufacturer, there is no gross annual receipts cap. There's only an employee cap of 100. So you could, as a manufacturer, presumably make $500 million a year and still be considered a small business as long as you have less than 100 employees. Now, that would be impressive to do with just less than 100 employees. But if you could do it, you would technically be a manufacturer. You'd be a small business. Now let's talk about this whole small business for public work. So this is an offshoot certification. It's a little bit different. It is for companies who work in the public works sector that have grown slightly too large for that small business certification, but are still not multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar companies. Because in the public works sector, for those of you in construction and do that, a $1 or $2 million contract is very small in the public works sector. And so it's very easy to grow beyond that $15 million cap. And so this certification, it raises it all the way up to $36 million in gross annual receipts and 200 employees. Now this certification only counts for public works projects. The regular small business certification counts for everything, including public works. So if you already possess a small business certification, there's no reason for you to get this public works. It's just extra work on your end. But if you are a small business and you're in public works and you are concerned about growing beyond that $15 million gross annual receipts or beyond that 100 employee cap, then yes, get the public works, and at least for the field of public works, you will be considered a small business, but not for any other contracts you do with the state. Now, if you meet all these criteria, congratulations, you get certified for 2 years, and you can renew that up to 90 days before it expires. It is on you to keep track of your expiration date. The system does remind you, but it is on you to keep track of it. We'd hate to see you lose your certification, especially if you're in the middle of a contract with the state or you're bidding on contracts and trying to get work. It's also a lot more work to start over and reapply than it is to just renew. Now let's talk the DVBE certification, Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise. So obviously we are talking about veterans of the U.S. Armed Services. And a disabled veteran is a veteran who has a 10% service-connected disability or more. If you are a veteran and you're wondering what your service-connected disability is, that's something that's determined by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs and the United States Department of Defense. It's not something the state of California has to deal with. So if you're curious about that, then you need to contact those entities and determine what your disability is. So a disabled veteran business enterprise is a company that is 51% owned by one or more disabled veterans. You can have one owner or 10, doesn't matter, as long as the breakup of ownership is that 51% of the company is owned by disabled veterans. Now, there's one exception. The exception is with limited liability companies. It needs to be 100% owned by disabled veterans. I don't know why there's a carve out for LLCs. There just is. Now, the geographic requirements are a little bit different. The business needs to be located anywhere within the contiguous United States. Sorry, Hawaii, Alaska, and the US territories. The disabled veteran business enterprise owners need to live in California. The other owners who aren't disabled veterans can live wherever they want. Now, lastly, the daily operations and management of the business must be conducted by disabled veterans. It doesn't need to be the same people who own the company, but it does need to be disabled veterans. You can probably guess that the spirit of this certification is really to support disabled veterans who own businesses and employ disabled veterans at those businesses. Just like the small business certification, if you qualify, you get certified for 2 years, and you renew that up to 90 days before it expires. Now, before we move on, let's pause for another quick Q&A session about those certifications and eligibility. We're going to talk about benefits next, so if you have questions about that, just hold on.
All right, Matt, we do have a lot of very, very good questions coming in here. I have one. If a company is registered as a foreign entity, but it is located in California, is it still eligible for SB certification if their headquarters is in California?
Registered as a foreign entity. So that is a very interesting question. Haven't gotten that one before. So I'll say, depending on your incorporated status, so obviously you all know that, there's limited liability companies, there's sole proprietorships, there's partnerships, and then there's different types of corporations from L Corps to S Corps, even C Corps. So there's lots of different incorporated statuses. Whether or not you as a company need to be registered with the California Secretary of State is going to be based on your incorporated status. So I can't speak specifically to that business. Most likely, if you were to register your company and then apply for registration or apply for certification, your application would probably be taken under review by a certification officer, since that is a very interesting scenario. But good question.
Awesome. Okay, next question. Is there a gross annual receipt cap for a DVBE?
No. So great observation. There is no gross annual receipts cap, and there is no employee cap for DVBE. DVBEs can grow massive, $100 million companies and bigger.
Awesome. Okay, and then I'm also getting some questions here about the state's SB micro certification. Matt, you didn't speak to that in our first section. That's not something that you actually apply for. Correct me here if I'm wrong too, Matt. If you are under a certain dollar threshold amount, you automatically are put into the SB micro certification. So doesn't make you any lesser. It's not any lesser of a certification or anything like that. It's just kind of the way that DGS orders its businesses.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. We think of it as a designation, less of a certification, and I believe the caps are 3.5 million gross annual receipts and 25 employees.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then we have one more question here about the public works certification.
Mm-hmm.
Should a small business with 10 employees certified for a small business designation or a public works certification?
Just the regular small business, not the public works. Unless you're managing to make more than $15 million in gross annual receipts a year with 10 employees, which if you can do that in your company, that's incredible. And you're probably doing great.
Awesome, Matt. That's all we have for now. Let's go ahead and move on. Thank you.
All right. So let's talk about benefits of certification. Why even get the certification in the first place? So when you get certified, and this is true whether you're a certified small business public works, DVBE, whatever, there's a number of core benefits. The first of which is access to contract opportunities, because being part of getting registered is getting kind of entered into the state's procurement system. And you actually get access to more contract opportunities than if you are not certified. So some contracts are exclusive to certified firms. Only certified businesses can actually bid on it. I'll give you an example. So every year, my team, Jolene and my Office of Small Business and DVBE Services, hires a videographer and a photographer for an event that we do. That contract is relatively small. It's under $10,000. Again, which for the state, 10 grand is really small. And when we write up the contract, we give it to the buyer who actually does the purchasing. We tell them, look, this contract should be exclusive to certified small businesses and DVBEs. Only consider bids from certified small businesses and DVBEs. So that means any company that's not certified is automatically excluded from the bidding process. Now, this is great for you once you get certified because it means you will be a preferred bidder with the state. The second way that it really supports you is, you're doing business with the California state government, and you end up getting entered into Cal eProcure, your business. This is the state's online marketplace. So regardless of what department you want to work with, or board, or agency, or commission, or whatever, regardless of what type of work you do, Cal eProcure is the one place where all of it happens. So part of this process, it means that you have a robust profile, a robust certification profile that allows the thousands of buyers throughout the state of California to find your company and try to include you in contract opportunities. This is a huge part of what it means to actually be certified. Another benefit is with organizations called reciprocity partners. So there are lots of cities and counties, transportation agencies, and local utilities throughout the state of California that have their own small business program. And often businesses want to work with the state of California and their local city and county, and they want to be a small business in the eyes of everybody. And the reciprocity partners are those entities that recognize and accept the state's small business or DVBE certification. Basically, it means you don't have to go to every single city and county and apply for their own special small business certification. If you did, you might be applying for 50 or 60 different certifications and have to keep track of them all. And that's just madness. But with the state certification, there is a short list of pre-approved cities, counties, transportation agencies, and utilities that readily accept your small business certification. So you'll not only be seen as a small business in the eyes of the state, but in all of these other entities. All right, one of the last benefits is DVBEs get a 5% bid incentive, and small businesses get a 5% bid preference on contracts. And those can stack, by the way, if you actually have both certifications, so it can be up to 10%. The DVB incentive, it can be anywhere from 0 to 5%, and that applies based off of the contract. So the contract will specifically say, does the DVB incentive apply? Yes or no. If it does, how much? Anywhere from 1 to 5%. The 5% bid preference for small businesses is a flat 5, and it always applies when you, as a small business, are bidding and at least one other non-certified small business is bidding. Now, there is a catch. That 5% preference is not to exceed $100,000. So I'm not the best at math, but I'm pretty sure 5% caps out at 100 grand on a $2 million contract. Right? So if you were bidding on a $1 million contract, that would be $50,000 of a preference that you could get. So it is a bit of a leg up on the big competition. We all know how hard it is to compete against large corporations. That is designed to help you out. The cap of 100,000 is the state attempting to balance a couple of goals. One is the goal to work with small businesses. The other is to spend taxpayer dollars efficiently. Often those two go hand in hand, and the small business is the good way to go. Sometimes they don't, and so there's a balancing act there. All right, let's do a quick Q&A about the benefits of certification. What questions do we have? Jolene, I believe your microphone is muted.
Whoops, technical difficulties. Sorry, guys. So we have a question here. Somebody would like you to clarify what does it mean to have a preference?
So bid preference means a couple of things. One is that you get basically on the evaluation, your bid is evaluated at a lower price than what you've done. So I'll give you an example. So if you, a certified business and a non-certified business, are bidding on a contract, they bid $100,000, you bid 102. Now, the vast majority of the time, the state goes with the lowest bid, which means you're losing right now because you're the high bid at 102. But you get a 5% preference, which means 5% of the lowest bid from a non-certified firm is subtracted from your bid for just for evaluation purposes, right? So 5% of the lowest bid, so that's $100,000. 5% of that is going to be $5,000. That is going to be subtracted from your bid, which was 102. Based on this reevaluation, your bid is 97,000. The other company is 100,000. The tables have turned. Now you're actually the low bid, and now you get the contract. But you don't get paid 97,000. You actually get paid 102. That math we did was just for evaluation purposes. And you can see as the contract gets bigger and bigger, that 5%, the dollar value obviously can get larger and larger. If you're bidding on a $200,000 contract or a $300,000 contract, it can actually be a substantial amount of money.
Awesome. Okay, one more question here. If you are a SB subcontractor, does the incentive apply for the overall contract, or would it just be for what you're contracting out?
Great question. So when you are subcontracting for a prime that is not certified, they're a large company, they actually get the benefits of your certification temporarily for that one contract. Now this is huge because it means there's a incentive for large companies to subcontract with you. So if a large company wants to beat out another large company, but they're worried about it and they're like, man, if only I had that 5% bid preference, that would be great. They can sub with you, the small, and suddenly get your preference. Now, also to clarify, you pursuing subcontracting with a large company is between you and the large company. They are not required to give you any sort of preference against other businesses vying for subcontracting opportunities. That's an agreement you reach between you and them. So that's not something where your preference would apply for you.
Okay.
Great question.
Perfect. And then that's all we have for now. Let's go ahead and move on.
Okay, let's move on then. So I want to talk a little bit about Caltrans. I mentioned it earlier as one of the benefits that you are going to get set up in Caltrans. So it is the place where you will register your company. It's where you will apply for certification. And it's actually where you're going to search for contract opportunities. It's meant to be kind of a one-stop place for everything related to contracting. It is entirely free. If you find that you are being prompted to enter credit card information, you have made a wrong turn somewhere. There are companies out there who you can pay to get you registered and certified on Caltrans. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly legal. Jolene and I are willing to help you for free. And we actually work for the state and are part of this system. So we encourage you to use us first. The website for that is just www.caltrans.ca.gov. At the end of this webinar, I'm actually going to show it to you. So I'm not going to jump into it right now, but I promise you will get to see this website before we're through today. I want to talk about kind of one resource. There's a lot of resources, but we're just talking about the intro today. So there's one resource that I want to talk to you about that I think is going to be really, really important for you to know. And those are the Small Business and Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise Advocates. All right, so when it comes to the state of California, these advocates are employees of the state of California, like Jolene and myself. And they don't work just for the state as a whole. They actually work for specific departments or boards or agencies or commissions. And they have unique knowledge of the goods and services that their department is going to buy. Often they are actually buyers that work for the department. They know how much money their department is going to spend. They even know like timelines when their department is going to be purchasing certain goods and services. They are primarily going to help you get contract opportunities with their department. They're someone that you can turn to questions about. Right? They have two roles. One is to work internally with their own purchasing staff to try and convince their buyers to solicit and include small businesses and DVBEs in contract opportunities whenever they come up. They also work externally with you, the business owners, and try and know who you are, try to help and support you in getting contract opportunities with their department. As much as Jolene and I would love to help you get a contract with, say, Department of Water Resources or the Department of Rehabilitation, we don't really have a specific knowledge of what they need to purchase today or tomorrow or a month from now. But advocates at those departments do. They know exactly what it is. And they're wonderful people for you to contact and get to know. I'm going to show you how to do that when we get to eProcure. Real quick question. Any questions about the advocates before we move on?
Hey, Matt. Yes, we do have a question here. How often is the advocate list updated, and is there a lot of turnover?
Great question. So the advocate list is updated every week on Fridays. I would say, is there a lot of turnover? I would say there is some. I would say most weeks we maybe update one name on the list. Some weeks we update more. I'd say within the last week or two, we actually haven't had any updates to the advocate list. So it really does depend.
Awesome. Is there one advocate per department?
Often there is about one advocate per department. Technically, departments, agency boards and commissions that have the authority to spend $100,000 or more for contract work, because that, they have to be given authority to do that. They have an advocate. Some departments actually have more than one. Caltrans, who's with us today, they have about one advocate per district, and they have 12 districts. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation often have one advocate per institution. So some actually have a lot more than that.
Okay, good to know. And then last question here, is the SBDC an advocate?
The Small Business Development Center. No, so the Small Business Development Center is not an advocate. The Small Business Development Center is actually part of the U.S. federal government. They are a branch of the U.S. Small Business Administration. You might have heard Abigail mention SBA earlier when she spoke about those other certifications. Yeah, Small Business Development Centers are funded by the U.S. government. They are wonderful resources. We actually partner with them a lot in the work that we do. They also focus in government contracting and helping small businesses and helping grow small businesses.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
All right. So we have one more kind of main topic to talk about here. It's called commercially useful function. It is not the cheeriest of subjects, but it is something we just need to talk a little bit about. All businesses that participate in state contracts in any way, whether you're the prime, a sub, a vendor sub, whatever, you need to be performing a commercially useful function to the state of California. And what that means is this. I'm not going to read it all out loud for you. You can see it. But basically the idea is that you need to be legitimately, legally, and meaningfully be providing work that is fulfilling the contract as stated. If you're not performing a commercially useful function, is these things. So sometimes what we see is a financial pass-through. So I'll give you an example of, let's say I'm a plumber and I do plumbing, and I get plumbing contracts every now and then, but I see a lot of contracts for electrical work, but I don't do electrical work. I have a friend who does. So what do? I bid on the contract for electrical work. I say I'm an electrical technician or engineer. I get the contract for $60,000, and then I subcontract out 100% of it to my friend for $50,000, and I pocket 10 for myself. So that's an example of not performing a commercially useful function. I did none of the work. I was simply a pass-through. The money went through me and went to my friend. The state just spent $10,000 on a finder's fee, pretty much. And that's not really useful. That's an example of not performing a commercially useful function. Other ones are businesses do work that is not actually in the contract, and then they say that it is part of the contract, therefore the state is actually paying for work that was not written in the contract. That's not a commercially useful function. Generally, commercially useful function is not a problem so long as you are open, honest, and transparent about how your business operates and what it is that you are actually doing. Commercially useful function is evaluated on each individual contract. So it's not related to when you register your business or when you certify your business. It's evaluated before the contract by the buyer or contract manager. It's also evaluated at the end of the contract. Sometimes in the middle too, it depends on the contract. We generally see that commercially useful function, or CUF, is a problem when businesses are purposely withholding information about how they're going to fulfill the contract or how they run their business. So for instance, encountering businesses who they say they're a supplier and they're a supplier of any good that exists. And they don't actually work with manufacturers. They just will, if someone needs office supplies, they'll walk into Office Depot or Office Max and buy the supplies and then ship them. They'll just order something off of Amazon to their house and mark up the price and send it in. These can be issues with commercially useful function. It's important to note that this is heavily influenced by industry standards, kind of how CUF is evaluated. For instance, in the construction industry, it is expected that you will subcontract a large amount of work. That's totally normal. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. You just need to be really clear about the fact that you're doing that. And the buyer or the contract administrator can let you know if that's a problem or not. For example, about 2 years ago, when we needed to hire a videographer and photographer, one of the companies said, "Oh, I'm interested in participating on this contract." And they said, "Well, I'm going to have to contract out 80% of the work because I can't do photography and I can't do video editing and I can't do post-production. I do have a camera though, and it can record." And we unfortunately had to tell the business that that does not meet a commercial function. It is not normal for a videographer to subcontract out 80% of the work. It is normal to hire on an extra camera person, or it is normal to hire on an extra photographer. And that's maybe 10% of the work or 20% of the work, but not 80% of the work. Similarly, for the IT industry is so incredibly specialized that it's normal for lots of subcontracting to take place for all the different specialties. So I've talked a lot about CUF. We usually have some people that are worried or nervous about this. Let's see what questions we have.
Okay, Matt, we do have a couple questions here. The first one is, how do we actually monitor CUF compliance?
So monitoring CUF compliance is something that the state does. So if you're worried or nervous about meeting it, it's something that the contract administrator is actually going to evaluate throughout the life of the contract. As long as you are just very honest and open about it. So in the contract, when the administrator asks, so are you going to be performing this work and are you going to be subcontracting any of it? Please detail out who the subcontractors are and what percentage of breakdown of the contract they are doing. Do that, and do that honestly. The contract administrator will let you know if that's going to be a problem regarding a commercially useful function.
Okay, and then we have another one here. If I have a business that employs independent contractors, but my business doesn't necessarily perform the service as a primary service for said contract, would that be in violation of CUF?
No, that would not be a violation of CUF. It sounds like this is probably in the construction industry. You mentioned independent contractors. That's usually the construction industry. So yeah, that should be fine.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and move on.
Okay, well, so we are kind of at the tail end of this presentation. And what I'm going to talk about next is really a lead into tomorrow. Hopefully a lot of you who have registered today also registered for the session tomorrow and are aware that this is just day 1 of the series and tomorrow is day 2. Because today we talked about this whole register your business on eProcure and apply for certification, but we didn't actually do it. And I haven't actually shown you exactly how to do it. Well, tomorrow is all about that. Tomorrow, at this exact same time, we're actually going to be going through step by step the entire registration process and maybe a little bit of the certification process, kind of show you how that gets started. So what I want to leave you with is the key information that you are going to need to start that registration process, to actually finish it, and to go through the entire certification process. And then after I go through that information, I'm going to show you eProcure to give you just a little bit of a preview. So there's a bunch of information you're going to need for your company. You're going to need tax information, website information, physical addresses, phone numbers, mailing addresses, emails. You're going to need to know how many employees you have. Do you provide goods or services? What kinds of goods and services? Are you a manufacturer? Kind of yes or no. These are all critical pieces of information for the registration and the certification process. Specifically, tax documents are for the certification process, not registration. And it's the last 3 years of tax returns. That is how the state determines, one, that you are an existing legal business and that you do meet the criteria. You know, that $15 million gross annual receipts, or 36 if you're going for the SPPW. That's how they use to determine it. A lot of this information is not necessarily required. You do have to put in your tax ID number. You do have to put in the legal name of your business, as well as any, do business as names that you have. And I'm not going to get into kind of all the details of the information that you're going to need because we're going to go over that tomorrow. But I do want to show you, before we dive into Q&A, I want to actually show you eProcure. So I'm going to show you that now. Hopefully everyone can see this. So this is the eProcure website. We mentioned it before, that's the little logo up in the corner. This is going to be kind of your one-stop shop for all stuff related to state procurement. You'll notice up here is a login and register button. So tomorrow for the live session, we're actually going to go here. We're gonna most likely do new bidder registration because that's what we are, and we're gonna start filling things out. And yes, there actually is a little message up at the top of this screen about COVID. So if you are interested, that's actually the website right there, where you can actually learn about COVID. And this is actually good to see. The website can be slow at times, so yes, it does sometimes take quite a while to actually connect to this, where you'll be able to see the registration process.
Hey Matt, I'm gonna interrupt you here really quick. We're getting a lot of questions while we're waiting for eProcure to load.
Okay.
We're getting a lot of questions about what if your business is less than 3 years old or 2 years old, or if you're a brand new registered business. Like what are you supposed to do when it comes to asking for tax documents?
Great questions. So if you are a brand new business, you haven't been in business that long, submit whatever tax returns you have. There is no requirement that you have to have been in business for any amount of time in order to pursue contract opportunities with the state. So if you created your company 2 weeks ago, no problem. You're not going to have any tax returns. That's no problem. You can still register and you can still apply for certification. If you've been around for 2 years and that's all the tax returns you have, submit those. If you are a sole proprietorship, if that's the type of company you have, which means that kind of you are your company, it means you're going to be submitting your personal tax returns And you will need to do that for 3 years. You'll see right here on the registration, I don't want to take you through the whole thing, but one of the options of the tax identification number that you're going to put in is a social security number. That is your personal social security number, and that you would do if you're a sole proprietorship. I know sometimes businesses have concern or feel nervous about submitting their personal tax returns. This information, it is a secure portal that you're submitting it to. It is all strictly confidential and kept secure and private. So, no one in the public is going to have access to this kind of information. But great question. Are there any other questions that we have? I just wanted to show you eProcure. I'm not going to show you everything. You can get an idea. This is what the registration process kind of starts with. And let me kind of jump back over to the PowerPoint. What other Q&As do we have about eProcure registration?
Yes, we do have a couple about the eProcure registration. Do I need to be registered in the state or an official corporation in order to register?
Great question. So it depends on your incorporated status. So there is not one blanket answer. If there's an issue with that, I would say as a sole proprietorship, no. So a sole proprietorship, you don't have to be registered with the Secretary of State. And I realize it can get it can get confusing. There's registering with the state of California to pursue contract opportunities with the state, and then there's registering with the state of California so you can have like a legally operating business. And those are two separate things. One is officially registering your company with the Secretary of State. So the California Secretary of State keeps tracks of all companies in the state of California. And this is also very separate from a business license. So you most likely may also have to have a business license to operate in whatever city or county that you live in. And certainly if you are a vendor and sell goods, you might have to have licenses related to being able to sell the goods that you sell. So this is, these are all different parts of owning a company.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you actually have to be registered with California Secretary of State as opposed to another company is going to be based on your incorporated status.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you'll determine when you fill out your certification application. If there is any concerns or question about it, then it'll get taken under review by a certification officer.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And if I start registration on eProcure, do I have to finish it all the way through?
No, so you can, let me see, if you start, so yes, so actually with the registration process, so the registration and the certification are two separate processes. You do registration first, then certification. You do need to finish the registration process all kind of in one go, because that's what gets you your account, and the system doesn't have a way of tracking your progress until you have an account with them. So yes, you do need to finish it all in one path. By the way, the registration process, can easily take 20 minutes. It depends on how computer savvy you are and if you have all your information with you, but you can go through it in 20 minutes flat. We'll definitely get through it in the 1 hour session that we have tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, and we can go ahead and move on from there.
Okay, great. I would say last thing I'll say is, this whole process, registration, certification, it's all online. So you're gonna be able to do it at your computer tomorrow, completely online. Even the whole certification process, if you've got all your information, can take 45 minutes. And if there aren't any unique circumstances with your application, you'll actually get certified immediately. You'll hit the submit button and it'll say, congratulations, you're certified. And then you give the system like 24 hours or 48 hours to update because, it's a bit of a slow system. But you'll get your certification ID number, you'll get an email kind of verifying everything. And then you'll have access to your account online. So hopefully tomorrow, some of you will actually have that happen. So we're moving into the review period here. We covered a lot of stuff today. And this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to state procurement. But we talked about kind of the overview of these programs, the commitment that the state has to spend money specifically with your businesses, small businesses and disabled veteran business enterprises. We talked about how to, become part of state contracting, registering your company, getting one of these 3 certifications. We talked about eProcure, this place that you're going to become very familiar with as you pursue contract opportunities with the state, as well as one of the main resources, the small business and the DVBE Advocates. And then we talked about commercial useful function, not the most enjoyable subject, but just something important for us to consider. We talked about a lot of information today. You know, this really is just the introductory workshop. You know, this is part of a whole series on working with the state of California. So, you know, do look at, there's webinars on May 8th. There's a there's a kind of a one-on-one sessions on May 14th. You can sign up for, I believe, a 10-minute time slot. I will be there, as well as one of my other coworkers, Jolene, where you can schedule a one-on-one with us for 10 minutes to answer any questions you have or get any information that you want. And later in the month of May, there are more advanced workshops on, you know, contracting with the state of California, as well as specifically working with Caltrans. So please do consider those webinars. With that, here's our contact information again, and that's the email address Jolene mentioned, custserve@dgs.ca.gov. Feel free to email that with any questions that you have. We'll get back to it within a day. Thank you all so much for participating and coming today. We have a little bit of time left. I'm glad we have that. Let's open it up to questions about anything we presented today, or even stuff we have not talked about today.
Hey, Matt, can we show them where to find the advocates?
Absolutely. So I'm going to show you eProcure. This is pretty much where you're going to start all the time. We're going to go to the section for small business and disabled veteran business enterprise in the section here. It's a big check mark. There's a lot of links here for different resources. If you scroll down, you'll see find a SB/DVBE advocate. If you click that link, it'll actually take you to the Department of General Services website. We kind of manage and maintain all these advocates. And this is where you can download the directory. We do provide a brief explanation of what the advocates are. It's similar to what I said. And we also provide a little bit of a guide on what you should do when you contact them. But if you click this, it'll actually download the directory. And the directory is an Excel spreadsheet. It's opening right now. I'll go ahead and share it with you so you can see. This is what it looks like. It's a big Excel spreadsheet. The first, you know, each row is a different advocate, and each column is a different piece of information about that advocate. So you've got the department they work for, the specific unit or office that they're in. This column is about construction. If there is an X in the column, it means that department does construction work. So for those of you who work in construction, you're welcome. We just made your job easier. Here, of course, you have the name of the advocate, their mailing address, and further down the row, you have their work phone, fax number, for those of you who still fax, email address, as well as website. So this is a list of advocates. You can see it's actually quite a long list. There's about 230 of them so far right now, and you can see Caltrans, they've got one per district. So yeah, so that is the advocates. Thank you for reminding me to share that, Jolene. Any other questions?
Yes, if you're not a U.S. citizen, can you still receive an SB or DVBE certification?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. How long does it take to get a DVBE certification?
Great question. So that time period is the same for a small business certification. You can actually, when you go to apply, you can actually apply for both at the same time. On the beginning of the application page, you actually get options to check off what certifications you want to apply for. So if you want to apply for both a small business and the DVBE, you just check them both and then hit next. And as you go through the application, it'll have questions for both certifications. And yeah, it takes the same amount of time.
Awesome. Okay, this one's a little long. Try and stay with me here.
All right.
If a company has one minority owner living outside of the state of California, but all of its other owners live in California, so over 90% of them, is the company still eligible for a small business certification?
Unfortunately, they are not.
Okay.
So all of the owners of the company need to have their primary residence in the state of California.
All right.
If it's a corporation, then the officers of the corporation all need to live in California.
Okay. In some public works contracts, a good faith effort is required. Do you know what that means?
I will say when it comes to interpreting contracts, we get a lot of questions about this. Small businesses want to know, they want to understand a contract. They've read it, but they don't quite understand it. That's kind of one of the boundaries that Jolene and I have in being able to help you. So we're not lawyers and we're not business, we're not experts in business. So when it comes to interpreting a contract, understanding how to execute it properly, that's not something Jolene and I are able to help you with. That's typically not something we can really do. There are other resources that can help you with that specifically. So we didn't talk about it today, but there are an organization called Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, or PTACs. Those are nonprofit organizations funded by a variety of sources. The federal government's one. They help businesses like you with government contracts, specifically bidding on government contracts. If you're wondering where they are, just Google them. There's tons of them throughout the state of California. I'm sure there's one near you wherever you are, and they're able to help you answer questions about contracts like that.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt. We are about out of time here. I'd like to take a second to thank our partners in advertising who are also resources for you as business owners. And we have the NorCal PTAC and Monterey Bay PTAC, who are both Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. We have the Small Business Development Centers, Cal Poly SBDC, Cal Coastal SBDC, the Economic Development Collaborative, Solving Chamber of Commerce, Santa Maria Chamber of Commerce, and other chambers. We'd also like to extend a large thank you to Caltrans, Granite Construction, and CPM Logistics. Alrighty, and I think that's all that we have here. We have recorded this webinar and it will be going on YouTube. Give us some time for that and then you will all get the link at a later date. Thank you all very much.